Just let me know. Oh, we're
We're
recording.
on.
All right. Hello, my name is Scarlett, and I am with Sexual Assault Services. And
My name is Annabelle, and I am the bilingual outreach advocate at Sexual Assault Services.
and I am the community I'm the community outreach specialist as well as our volunteer coordinator. And we're going to be presenting sexual assault, consent, and grooming and red flags, just kind of as a general information presentation. So let's just get started off with what does Sexual Assault Services do? So we do a few things, and everything we do is free of charge and confidential. And we are located in Racine, Wisconsin, and we serve the whole county of Racine. So we offer a 24-hour crisis line. And this, like I said, it is available 24 hours. Anyone can call and talk, and you can give as little information or as much information as you want. And then we also have a Spanish warm line, which is available 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., I believe. Okay, head shake. Yes, I got that right. 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. And the line is only answered in Spanish. The answering machine messages in Spanish. So it's our Spanish warm line. We also have a 24-hour hospital response. So if someone presents to the hospital for a sexual assault, what the person on the crisis line will respond to the hospital so that whoever survivors never have to go through that experience at the hospital alone. They always have an advocate there, someone there to provide support, comfort, resources, and just be there for them. Our organization also offers counseling. And again, like I said, all our services are free of charge, including the counseling. We offer short-term, long-term, temporary couple counseling, family counseling. We have the whole gambit, and our counselors are all master level counselors. We offer support groups. And then we also offer legal advocacy. So when a survivor is dealing with the entire situation of what happened to them and they're going through the court process and having interviews, we will be there as a support so they don't have to do it alone if they want us there. So, and then we have medical advocacy, so they don't have to go to doctor's appointments relating to the sexual assault alone. If they want us to come with, we're more than willing to come with. We also have family advocacy. We have a specific staff member who attends almost every case that shows up at the Child Advocacy Center, and they are there again as an advocate, as a support person, so you don't have to do this alone, and that you also have access to someone who can get you resources and connections to the community to make sure that your experience is as positive as it can be. And then all of our services are offered in Spanish and English. So our therapy, our advocacy, and like I said, we even have our Spanish warm line. And then as an organization, we offer information and referrals. So if you're trying to find something in the local Racine, Wisconsin area, or even outwards, we do our best to connect you to the right places, or at least give you the right starting point if we don't have the information ourselves. And then we do community presentations, which you are a part of or watching if you're watching the recording. All right, next slide. All right, so we're going to start off with what is sexual assault. Sexual assault is any type of sexual contact or behavior that occurs without the explicit consent of the recipient. And this does not always have to include intercourse, because again, this is sexual contact. Sexual assault can include any contact with private body parts that you don't agree to, or forced to do. Again, consent is a really big part of that component. If you're not consenting, it's sexual assault. And then, so we're going to talk about some statistics. So if we picture 3 women and 6 men that you know, statistically speaking, 1 in 3 of those women and 1 in 6 of those men have been sexually assaulted in their lifetimes. So again, if you picture 3 women you know and 6 men you know, those are, that's a small group of people, and statistically someone's been sexually assaulted. And it puts it kind of in perspective of your community and your circle. 1 in 9 girls and 1 in 53 boys under the age of 18 experience sexual abuse or assault at the hands of an adult. Most survivors of sexual abuse know their offender. We have this big stereotype that was pushed a lot, that like stranger danger, don't get in the van, that type of thing. But statistically, most sexual assault survivors and everything know their abuser, and it's normally someone in their bubble that they know. And then 93% of child survivors know their offender. So only 7% of child survivors don't know their offender. So again, this is important, why we want to share information, why we want to help educate, so that you can be on the lookout and help protect the people you care about. Every 9 minutes, Child Protective Services substantiates or finds evidence for a claim of sexual abuse. So throughout this presentation, there's going to basically be six. I can't math right now. There's going to be 6 substantiated child protective claims of abuse that's going to happen just during this presentation, which is, kind of just. And then 82% of all victims under 18 are female. Females aged 16 to 19 are 4 times more likely than the general population to be victims of rape, attempted rape, or sexual assault. So again, this is why it's important that we want to educate the younger generation, and we want to educate the adults that protect our younger generation, because like the 16 to 19 range are 4 times more likely to be a victim of sexual assault.
Louisiana purchased for 800 members of the.
And then 45% of girls under 15 say their first intercourse was non-consensual. So 45% of girls under 15. And this leads into the next statistic, which kind of blows me away. An estimated 60% of teen girls' first pregnancies are preceded by experiences of molestation, rape, or attempted rape. So 60%, that's more than half of teen girls' first pregnancies are preceded by molestation, rape, or attempted rape. And then 25% of all rapes are committed by an intimate partner. Again, this falls within the sexual assault or abuse are normally done by someone that the person knows. It's not stranger danger, it's someone you know. All right, so I mentioned that consent is really important. So why don't we talk about consent? Why don't we define consent? Bam. What is consent? It is a affirmative, unambiguous, continuous, and conscious decision by each participant to engage in a mutually agreed upon sexual activity. So really important is silence is not consent. Not saying anything does not mean that the person is consenting to what is happening. When someone is sexually assaulted, we talk about fight, we talk about flee, but we don't talk about freeze. And that's a very valid response because it's fight, flight, and freeze. So just because someone is not saying something when you're engaging in sexual activity does not mean it's consent. In fact, they could be frozen because what's happening to them is overwhelming their senses and they're not able to process or even tell you no because they're frozen in place. So again, it's affirmative and unambiguous. Consent is, enthusiastic. They want to do this with you. And also, an individual can consent to some sexual activity and not consent to anything else. Just because they said yes to one activity does not mean they're consenting to all of the other activities. Consent is an ongoing conversation between both parties. It doesn't just happen at the beginning and then you assume it's for the rest of the time that you're engaging with each other. And then conscious, a person cannot consent if they're unconscious. So if you find someone passed out at a party, they cannot consent. They cannot consent to anything because they're not conscious. So again, consent, affirmative, unambiguous, continuous, and conscious. Because we want everyone to have a good time. And to do that, everyone needs to be in agreement of what's happening and be okay with it. All right. So teaching consent to children's age 1 to 5. Because consent starts at all ages. It doesn't just happen with sexual assault. Consent is in life, everything we do, we should be consenting when we're interacting with people. For example, teach children to ask permission before touching or embracing a playmate. Can I hug you? Can I shake your hand? Can we physically touch? And make sure that the children understand that it's okay to say no. It's okay to tell someone like, no, you don't have permission to touch me, and that the other person has to respect that. And then help create empathy within your child by explaining how something they have done may have hurt someone else. So the example here is, I know that you wanted that toy, but when you hit Caleb, it hurt him and he felt very sad. And we don't want Caleb to feel sad because we hurt him. So explaining situations so children can understand how the other person feels, the expression, walk a mile in my shoes type thing, it allows people to have empathy, to have understanding, and it creates a better world when we understand where people are coming from. And teach your kids that no and stop are important words that should be honored. You like when people honor when you tell them no, and other people feel the same. So if we teach children that from a young age, it creates a more consent-filled culture. Encourage children to read facial expressions and other body language: scared, happy, frustrated, sad, angry, the whole spectrum of emotions. Explain, just help bridge the gap of understanding so children understand what's going on when someone makes that face, when they make their arms cross, that they might feel uncomfortable or scared. And then never force a child to hug, touch, or kiss anybody for any reason. As parents, you should ask permission to hug or kiss or touch your child, and then ask other adults in your child's life to do the same. Again, consent is very important. And this empowers your child to make decisions about their own body, and will make them feel more powerful later in life as well, because they understand that they're in charge of their space and other people have to ask permission to engage with it. And then encourage children to wash their own genitals during bath time. And of course, parents can help, but you want to model consent by asking for permission to wash your children's body. And these are all good things to teach for children ages 1 to 5. And the no and stop is something that we can teach people at every age, but these are some good things ages 1 to 5. All right. And here's some more. Give children the opportunity to say yes or no in everyday choices too. So what they wear, what they play with, how they do their own hair. This allows them, again, to feel in control of their life. And gives them the opportunity of saying yes or no, and empowering our children. Teach them the correct words for their genitalia. Make it a safe space for kids talking about their bodies and sex. The story that gets told sometimes, and it's actually happened, is a child came up to a teacher and said, someone's been touching my cookie. And the teacher is like, oh, okay, someone's touching a food object. And they didn't understand that the name that the child was taught for their vagina was cookie. So the abuse was missed because the child was never taught the anatomical names for their body. And so there was a miscommunication when, the child informed the teacher. So again, this is why it's important to try to teach our kids the correct name of the human body. And then talk about gut feelings or instincts. Sometimes things that make us feel weird or scared or yucky, and we don't know why. Their belly voice is sometimes right. Encourage your kid to talk to you and express why something made them feel uncomfortable. Encourage communication. And then let them know if they ever have a gut feeling that is confusing, they can always come to you for help through their feelings and making decisions. And another thing that you can do with your kid is make a safety plan. So you can say, you can always come to me, and you can always come to your father. You can always come to your grandma, and allow the children to know who they can talk to, so they always feel that they can confide in somebody. And then use your words. Don't answer and respond to temper tantrums. Ask your child to use words, even just simple words, to tell you what's going on. So encourage them to communicate and explain to you what's happening. Because again, communication is important. All right. Ages 5 to 12 about consent. So they're a little bit older now. We've taught them the basics. So teach kids that the way their bodies are changing is great, and it can be confusing sometimes. And the way you talk about these changes can reduce shame and embarrassment. You be scientific, direct, and answer any questions. Don't make them feel uncomfortable or awkward that they're growing up and things are happening and they don't feel how they felt before. Just say it's completely natural and we're going to talk about it, and what questions do you have? And if you're looking for resources on how to have these conversations, there are some great websites that have resources. You can always reach out to us and we can share them with you. I know the library has a bunch of great books on things that you can do, and I know they'd be willing to help people find these resources. So, and then encourage your children to talk about what feels good and what doesn't. For example, do you like being tickled? Do you like hugs? What doesn't feel good? And this leads into consent. So for example, not every child is going to want to be touched or be hugged. And so for some, hugging won't feel good. So for some, tickling won't. And having that open conversation is very important. Remind your child that everything they're going through is natural. It's all normal. It doesn't make it any less awkward for kids sometimes, but at least they're not alone and it's normal. And then teach your kids how to use safe words during play and help them negotiate a safe word to use with their friends. At this age, saying no may be part of the play. So they need to have one word that'll stop all activity. And it's normally something kids wouldn't normally say, like platypus. Like, what are the odds of kids saying platypus in the middle of playing? Just coming up with a safe word so they know this behavior and everything needs to stop. We need to evaluate what's going on so that everyone feels safe. And then teach kids to stop their play occasionally, to check in with one another and make sure everything is feeling okay, because this leads into further conversations when they're older, where maybe they are engaging in sexual activity with a partner. They can have that healthy conversation and ask the partner, like, hey, you seem a little off. Are you still okay? Do you still want to do this? I just want to make sure you're enjoying this too. And this all starts at a young age. All right. Encourage kids to watch the facial expressions during play to make sure everyone's happy on the same page. Play a rewind game. If they come home and tell you about seeing bullied, help kids replay the event and interpret these behaviors. Again, it's always important to listen to your kids. If they come home and they want to tell you about what happened, it allows you to be engaged in the conversation. It allows you to be connected with your child. And it allows them to feel that they can come to you and talk about small issues and big issues later on. And then don't tease kids for their boyfriend, girlfriend feelings or for having crushes. It's normal. And when we tease, it makes people sometimes feel ashamed of the feelings, and it might make them hostile about the feelings instead of just feeling happy that they're having these feelings. And then teach children that their behaviors affect others. Ask them to observe how people respond when other people litter. Ask them what they think will happen as a result. Will someone else have to clean it up? Play through the whole scenario with your child. It basically cause and effect. When I do this, this happens, and how does this affect other people in turn? And then teach kids to look for opportunities to help. This teaches kids to be more willing to help when someone else is struggling, being bullied, being sexually harassed. For example, when we teach people to feel confident in standing up and helping others, it allows, and for example, in situations where people are being catcalled or feeling uncomfortable on subways or walking alone at night, and feeling like they might be, it allows people to step up and be there for them, because we taught them from a young age that we should all protect each other and be there for each other. All right. Okay, so teaching teens about consent. So we taught them when they were younger, taught them a little bit older, and well, now they're teenagers. So there's a lot going on in their lives. It's still important though to have these conversations. So there is an age where various touch games emerge, butt slapping or boys hitting one another in the genitals, pinching each other's nipples to cause pain. We must get kids talking about the ways in which these games impact other people. So if we've had these healthy conversations when they're younger, it won't be hard to have these conversations when they're older, where we talk about, hey, did you get consent? Did they want this interaction? How do you think this made them feel? And then ask them how they'd feel if someone hit them in the way that they did. or sometimes something that made them feel uncomfortable or violated. So the expression, we've heard this a lot, and it's not, this isn't just boys being boys. This is harassment, and this is sometimes assault, because there was no consent. There was no agreement for this physical touch. So we need to start young and then reinforce the behavior when they get older. Teens build teen self-esteem. So in middle school, bullying shifts to specifically target identity, and self-esteem starts to plummet around age 13. So by 78% of girls report hating their bodies. That's not a small number of females to say they hate their bodies, 78%. And we can help with that by building up people's self-esteem, by giving them empowerment in their own bodies. And this applies to men, this applies to women. So again, let's work on building up the self-esteem of other individuals, and start incorporating information about consent. We are often good at talking about waiting until marriage to have sex, or about sexually transmitted infections, or practicing safer sex, but we don't usually talk about consent. Which is why we have a whole section in this PowerPoint about consent, because it's really important. So we want to ask questions like, how do you know whether or not your partner is ready to kiss you? And explain that only yes means yes. Don't wait for your partner to say no to look for consent. So there's this really great video, you can look it up. I believe it's called like Consent is Sexy. And it just talks about how having unambiguous yes in the middle of like whether it's kissing, hugging, touching is just so empowering, and it adds to the moment. And since we're not used to it as a culture, it's hard for us to do, but it's actually so empowering whenever what you're doing with someone, they tell you, yes, I want you to hug me, yes, I want you to kiss me, because it means they really want that interaction with you. And that, like I said, that's an empowering feeling. So consent's important. And then nip locker room talk in the bud. It fosters negativity and bad behaviors, and it makes people feel worse about themselves, and it leads into bad habits like catcalling and street calling. All right. So tell your kids that no matter what they're feeling, they can talk to you about it. Again, this falls into that safe zone thing that we talked about when they were younger, because if they feel like they can talk to you when they're younger and you continue that when they're older, then they don't feel so alone. So, but their feelings and desires and needs are no one's responsibility but their own. So they still need to practice kindness and respect with everyone around them. So we want to encourage them to talk to you and have an open communication. And you want to encourage them to have some independence and realize that they need to take care of their emotional needs. And yeah, and then talk to teenagers and college age boys about what masculinity is versus toxic masculinity. These conversations encourage nonviolent forms of masculinity for the future. There's some great video examples if you look online of like toxic masculinity versus masculinity. And it's really good to have those conversations. And then talk honestly with kids about partying. Make it clear that you don't want them drinking or using drugs, but that you know kids party and you want your kids to be informed. If you're open and honest with your kids and you explain what's going to happen when they do things, instead of just telling them no and shutting the conversation down, it encourages open communication. People are less likely to do negative behaviors if they understand why they shouldn't do it. If you do this, this is what's going to happen to your body. This is how you're going to feel. This is how it may impact others. And then it allows your kids to make clear, informed decisions because you've explained why instead of just telling them no. And then make it clear that people cannot consent to sex when they are intoxicated. Because again, consent is clear, enthusiastic, and you have to be awake to consent. And you have to be functioning. So if you've been drinking a lot and although you're talking, you're still not able to consent. So teach your kids to stand up for and seek help for individuals who've had too much to drink. If we create a caring environment where we all take care of each other, then we won't have those kinds of issues anymore because we're taking care of each other. And then keep talking about sex and consent with teens as they start having serious relationships. It normalizes talking about consent, so talk openly and respectfully with partners, so it becomes second nature to teens. So yeah. Aha, all right.
So yeah, so now we're moving into healthy relationships. So what is a healthy relationship? Healthy relationship is when two people develop a connection based on mutual respect, trust, honesty, and support. And it's really important to be able to identify healthy versus unhealthy relationships because, as Scarlett said earlier in the statistics, 25% of all rapes are committed by an intimate partner, and that is an alarming rate. That's a quarter. So here we have the power and control wheel. So we're going to talk about some signs of unhealthy relationships. And the power and control wheel is a tool that is used in domestic violence, in the field of domestic violence, to kind of understand the tactics abusers use to gain power and control over their victims. And this wheel was developed by Domestic Abuse Intervention Program in Duluth, Minnesota. So on the outside of the wheel, you have physical and sexual violence. And this is like the big part of what's used to keep, that dominating role, that power and control that you see in the middle of the wheel. And then you have the tactics used to get and keep that power and control that's in the middle. So you have like intimidation, yelling or screaming, using threatening tone, talking down, threatening to hurt yourself or your partner, making your partner feel afraid. Those types of like intimidating somebody. And then you have emotional abuse. So humiliation, putting your partner down, calling them names, criticizing them always, making them feel crazy, or making them feel guilty or embarrassing them in front of other people. And then you have isolation. So you're controlling who they see, what they do, where they go, and then, justifying these actions through jealousy. And then minimizing, denying, and blaming. So making light of the abuse or denying it happens, shifting the blame or the responsibility by saying like they caused the abuse to happen. So if you would just listen, none of this would happen. Using children, so making them feel guilty about the children, or using children as go-between, threatening to take children away. Then we also have male privilege, so treating your partner like a servant or making all of the big decisions, acting like the master of the castle, and really using that that toxic masculinity or that male privilege as an excuse to act out violently, or to be, the master of the castle. Economic abuse, so controlling all the finances and not letting them get a job or make money of their own in any way. Just keeping that power over them by them having to ask you for money. Using coercion and threats, so making or carrying out threats like hurting themselves or threatening to hurt themselves or hurt others, hurting pets, those types of things, forcing the partner to do something that they don't want to do. So those are just the different things in that power wheel for an unhealthy relationship. So the things listed on the side here, like control, hostility, dishonesty, disrespect, dependence, so making them believe they can't live without them, intimidation, and physical violence and sexual violence. So signs of a healthy relationship, right? So that's mutual respect. You want to make sure that there is respect on both parts, trust, trusting one another with tasks, with responsibilities, and just trusting that they'll be making right decisions, honesty, compromise, and that's like making sure that, you know, one or the other is always compromising, and it's not the same person that's always compromising either. That's not healthy. So making sure that you have an even level of compromise, and given that's kind of like give and take. So, you know, just knowing that, you know, you're doing, you know, sometimes it's you, sometimes it's that person, you know, knowing that it's an even balance in that relationship. Good communication. So being able to say things like, you know, I feel like I'm the only one compromising all the time, right? And then being able to talk about that. Um, anger control. So controlling that anger. So like if you a healthy relationship, you should not be afraid to say something like the statement I just said, like, I feel like I'm always making all the compromises. For, you know, you shouldn't feel afraid to say something like that, because your partner's going to be angry for you sharing your emotions and your feelings. And fighting fair. So you, a healthy relationship fights fair. You don't bring up things that have said to have gotten over before in the past, or that you've forgiven already, or you've already discussed, or something that'll really hurt somebody deep. Problem solving. So you're able to look at what's going on, discuss it, and come up with a compromise, come up with a solution in the relationship. Understanding and compassion. And then also a healthy sexual relationship, which means only doing things that both of you are comfortable with doing, no pressure, and that total consent that Scarlett was talking about. So grooming, trafficking, and red flags. So we have grooming. So when someone builds a relationship, trust, and emotional connection with a child or young person, so they can manipulate, exploit, and abuse them. And then we have human trafficking, which involves the use of force, fraud, or coercion to obtain some type of labor or commercial sex act. And these, the term is used for both children and adult. And the element of force, fraud, or coercion is not necessary to be present in sex trafficking of minor. And these two terms go sometimes hand in hand. You know, when there's grooming, a lot of times there can potentially be trafficking. So some things to remember. So anyone can be a victim of grooming and trafficking, right? There is no if you do this, you know, you're never going to be you can never be a victim, right? So it's, everybody can be a victim. There are populations and people that are more susceptible or more vulnerable. Age is one of those. So the younger the children are, the more susceptible they can be. And it's important to remember that it often starts, the grooming process often starts with like a friendship. And this is for like online stuff. You know, they begin with building a friendship, like for example, like on Snapchat or like Instagram. You know, the groomer can pick up on some of the things that you know, the victims or potential victims are posting. So that's why it's especially important for young teens, young kids, older teens, and even adults to, you know, be mindful of the stuff that they're putting on their social media, because like anybody can get this information and use it to befriend them. And then they can use it to like say, hey, you know, we both like this, or do you know so-and-so, because they know who your friends are, and, you know, name dropping and stuff like that. And then perpetrators, they often, like groomers often use like favors or promises of favors to build that trust and to build that initial friendship. And they encourage kids or teens or people they're grooming to let their guard down and think of them as like a friend or like a romantic interest or a mentor or something like that. And then promising them things like they'll do something for them and then using that against them later on. So giving them something And then saying like, remember when I gave you that, or remember when I helped you do this, now you owe me, right? So using those things. And then it's also like secrecy plays a big part in grooming, and it'll start with something small. It can start with something small, don't tell anybody that we're friends because, they might get jealous, or don't tell anybody I bought you that purse or that, that phone or whatever, because then other people are going to ask me for it. And then, normalizing that secrecy so that when it's something bigger, they will be okay with keeping those secrets. And then it can also be hard to distinguish grooming from romantic feelings. So a lot of times when somebody is grooming somebody, especially for human trafficking, they make it feel like it's a relationship. So there'll be a lot of those signs of that, like power and control. And all of this starts really slow with those little things. And it can start really, really subtle, where that you're like, all of a sudden there, that line from like being romantic to being like, now you're being human trafficked, is almost invisible, where you can't see it. So yeah, I think that's, oh, and then millions of men and women and children are trafficked each year. So that was my point of all of those grooming tactics. So on the last slide, we were talking about grooming in the context of like an unknown individual, and purposely for like human trafficking, or most likely for human trafficking. And we'll talk a little more about signs that someone is being trafficked a little later in the presentation. But on this side, we're now going to talk about someone who already has access to a child, and that's grooming them or the family. So these are signs that an adult may be grooming or sexual abusing a child. So they don't respect boundaries or listen when someone tells them no. So they're, if somebody's doing something and you ask them to stop, and then they repeatedly continue that behavior, even though you told them to stop. They engage in touching that a child or child's parents or guardians have indicated is unwanted. So again, that you've asked them to stop doing that, or stop touching them that way, stop tickling them, like they don't like being tickled, or like Scarlett said, some kids don't like to hug. So, they don't want to hug you, and then constantly wanting to hug them and not respecting those boundaries. Tries to teach a child, tries to be a child's friend rather than filling an adult role in the child's life. So really trying hard to be a friend instead of like somebody who that child can come to if they need help. Does not seem to have age appropriate relationships. So again, trying to be part of that child's life in an inappropriate way. Talks to children about their personal problems or relationship, and that's not like in like a helpful way. So like if a child is having problems in a relationship, maybe they're seeing some of those signs of that, like power and control and coming to somebody, that's absolutely normal. But where they're trying to be a part of that child's like teen life and befriend all of the teens, that's inappropriate. Spends time alone with children outside of their role in the child's life, or makes up excuses to be alone with the child. So really trying excessively to be alone with that child without like, or making up excuses, where it's not like a parent coming up to somebody and asking for a babysitter. It is like, I want a babysitter, right? Expressing unusual interest in children's sexual development, such as commenting on sexual characteristics or sexualizing normal behaviors. Just saying inappropriate things about, a child's development, their body, or, the way they're acting or stuff, just saying it inappropriately. Gives a child gifts without occasion or reason. And this is like, especially without the parents' knowledge, right? So they're just giving, you know, the child like a phone or like jewelry or something, and not talking about the parents. So it wouldn't be like maybe the parents can't afford something and going to the parents and saying, hey, you know, I noticed like you can't afford this. Is it something you need? Is it something I can help you with? It's going to the child. And then even what would make it even worse would be like trying to keep that a secret from the parent. Spends a lot of time with your child or another child, you know. So just specifically wanting to be alone with that child at all the time. And then restricts a child's access to other adults, where they're like I was kind of said earlier, like they're, you know, they're wanting to babysit all the time. Like I'm the only person that can babysit that person, or you know, I'll drop anything and everything if you need a babysitter, just call me and tell me, right? So, you know, it's different than when they say like, you know, if you need it, you know, you can call me if I'm available, I'll let you know. But, you know, everybody has a life, and that obsessiveness with a child can be a big flag, big red flag. So what are the signs that a child may have experienced sexual abuse? Now, this is not a complete list by all means, and it does not necessarily mean that it is sexual abuse. It can also be signs of other problems and other things that might be going on. So it's definitely things that you may want to check in with your child and monitor. But again, this is not a complete list. So some behavioral signs like sexual behavior that is inappropriate for the child's age. So excessive talk about or knowledge of sexual topics or sexual components to drawings and games. So these are things that you're unable to explain where these things came from, like why does your child or know this, or how does your child know this, or you know, why are they drawing these things, like where did you see this? Really having a conversation to see what's going on. Keeping secrets or not talking as much as usual. So this is especially for kids that talk a lot and all the time. You know, if now they're not wanting to talk to you or to maybe like an older sibling or somebody that they really felt comfortable talking to, because let's, you know, be honest, teens don't always want to talk to their parents, but if they're really shutting down from like everybody that they want to talk to or people that they have talked to in the past, that's a big red flag. Not wanting to be left alone with certain people or being afraid to be away from primary caregivers, especially if this is a new behavior. So there are kids that just don't like being away from their parents. And if that's typical, then that's not something to necessarily worry about. But if your child is like, they always want to be somewhere, or they don't never had a problem with that, and then all of a sudden their mood changes, and all of a sudden they don't want to stay at that place anymore, or they just constantly want to be by you, that is a sign. Resuming behaviors that they had outgrown, like thumb sucking, bedwetting, biting, or rocking. So really regressing. So going back to these behaviors that they've grown out of all of a sudden. And this isn't like, you know, an accident of a bedwetting. This is like now they're doing it all the time, where they were already potty trained and now they're just wetting the bed all the time. Some emotional signs, a change in eating habits. So if they were like a really healthy eater and now they're not eating at all, or if they didn't really eat that much and now they're constantly eating, like they're using food as a coping mechanism where they're just eating all the time. Change in mood or personality, such as like increased aggression. So now all of a sudden they're like angry. And this isn't just like hormonal changes, you know, because all teens go into like hormonal changes, whether they're male or female. They get angry easily. This is their personality. And this is something like you've just noticed all of the sudden. A decrease in confidence or self-image. A lot of times kids start to think less of themselves when they're being abused. Excessive worry or fearfulness, where they're thinking like something's going to happen, or they don't, and that could be why they don't want you to leave them, or why they don't want to be alone. Increase in unexplained health problems such as like stomach ache or headaches. And this is especially if like now they're somewhere they used to go all the time. It's like, say they used to go to aunt's house all the time. And now all of a sudden, every time they want to go to aunt's house, they have a stomach ache or they have a headache. So it's not necessarily like a health problem. It's more of like an excuse that they don't want to go to this place anymore. So if it's like to one particular place where all of these aches are coming in or playing a role in, that's a red flag. Loss or decrease in interest in school activities and friends. So when, you know, you notice that they were very active in school and had a bunch of friends, and now they don't want to do any of those things that they were interested in anymore. Nightmares or fear of being alone at night. So now they don't want to be left alone at night. That could be a sign that, you know, they're having bad dreams, or that somebody is coming into their room and they don't want that to happen. So they want a safe person to be there. Self-harming behaviors. So if they're cutting themselves or pulling out their hair or, you know, burning themselves, those are self-harming behaviors and are signs that something is going on. And then finally, suicidality, if they're having thoughts of suicide, you know, that's something we need to respond to. So the vulnerability of exploitation. So this is a quote from someone who worked with somebody who was trafficked. So one survivor leader whom we work with, who was trafficked from the age of 10 to 17, all through California, Nevada, Washington State. She talks about how, for her, foster care was the training ground to being trafficked. She understood that she was attached to a check, and that what she points out is that at least the pimp told her that he loved her, and she never heard that in any of her foster care placements. So this really speaks volumes to the vulnerability of children in the system, right? That a lot of times they're lacking that love, and really where they're getting it and what they're seeing, those like unhealthy relationships is making them vulnerable to trafficking. So vulnerability to exploitation, so that domestic violence, right? Those unhealthy relationships. So they're thinking that violence and love go hand in hand, especially if that's all they've seen. They've only seen unhealthy relationships, so they think that that's what love looks like. Addiction, where, you know, you're willing to do anything for that addiction. That makes you vulnerable to human trafficking. Loss of a parent, where now you feel alone and you're lacking that love again. Mental health concerns, learning or cognitive disabilities, racism, sexism, classism, the LGBTQ plus community. So, you know, especially the LGBT plus community, it makes them really vulnerable. Many times when they come out, families don't accept them or they kick them out. So now they're on the streets, and what can they do, right? They're more vulnerable to accepting that assistance from somebody who wants to just use them. Some red flags for trafficking. So if they have a history of running away, so if they're constantly running away, that makes them more vulnerable, or that can be a red flag to trafficking, especially because teens don't have access to a lot of things. Like if you're under 18, you know, you don't have a bank account necessarily, you can't use all of these things. So they need an adult. You know, you can't rent a home, you can't rent an apartment, you can't do any of those things. So you need an adult to do these things for you. Has visible signs of abuse, so often only on the body, not the face. Behaviors are consistent with PTSD, so hypervigilance, anger, fear, etc. The attire or dress is inappropriate for the season or situation. So they're layering up in the heat, and that is oftentimes to cover up those injuries that could be to the body. Clothing, jewelry, phone has upgraded over time in a way that can't be accounted for by a family's financial situation. So that, again, that grooming process where they're getting things that they don't have money for. Or they have a tattoo with the youth that their youth is reluctant to explain, and that's branding that's often used to like say that that's somebody's property. And then if they're found in an area for prostitution, and that's physical or website, if they're seen in certain areas where prostitution is known for, if they're frequently truant from school, that means somebody's can be taking them and putting them in these vulnerable situations. If they're involved with a male who is significantly older than they are, or gang involved, if they have a history of multiple STIs and or pregnancies, has access to hormone injections outside of supervision of medical provider, and that's for trans youth. So oftentimes trans youth want these hormone injections bad enough where they'll get them from somebody, and oftentimes they're not injecting them with hormone injections, they're injecting them with drugs to get them hooked, and then they have that power over them. If they have new friends that are older teens or adults, and if they disconnect from family or other caregivers, that's that isolation where they're ripping them away from the people that they trust. So what to do if your child discloses abuse? So your reaction to the disclosure will have a big effect on how your child deals with the trauma of sexual abuse. So to be supportive, it's important to stay calm, believe your child, and let your child know that they are not to blame for what happened, and reassure them that they are loved. Protect your child by getting them away from the abuser and immediately reporting the abuse to local authorities. Get help. That's where SAS comes in, so where you can get our counseling and all of our other services. Don't make promises you can't keep, but let your child know that you will do everything in your power to protect them. So don't promise them that everything will be okay, because honestly, we don't know it'll be okay, but you can let them know that you will be there with them throughout this whole process, and that you'll do everything in your power to help them. Keep your child informed about what will happen next, especially when talking about the legal process. So the legal process takes about 2 years here in Racine, and that's a long time. So really letting them know, like, this is what's going to happen next. And SAS can certainly help with that process as well. So here are some barriers to disclosure. So why people wouldn't disclose: because they fear the perpetrator may hurt them or their families, fear that they will not be believed or will be blamed, worried that their parents will be upset or angry. Often kids are fearful that their parents may end up incarcerated for hurting the perpetrator. So like when parents say, I'll kill anyone who hurts you, while those are valid feelings, they can discourage children to come forward. So really being mindful of what you say in front of your children. Fear that disclosing will disrupt the family, and that's especially if the perpetrator is part of the family. Sometimes children they want the abuse to stop, but they don't want that person to get in trouble because they love that person. Fear that if they tell, they will be taken away or separated from their families. So these are all valid fears that come up and that are real for kids, and why they don't come forward. And I know I went through that last part like kind of fast because there wasn't that much time left. So if there's any questions, we have a few minutes for questions.
I have a question. Where are you physically located? Where are your offices or?
Yeah, so we're at 2000 Dominic Drive on the 4th floor. So that's a lot of people know it as the United Way building. We're on the 4th floor there.
Any other questions? I'm also going to put in the chat.
You're muted, Scarlett.
I put in the chat if you can fill out this survey, even if you watch this as a recording, and just respond to this presentation. It'll take literally like 2 or 3 minutes at most, and it helps our funding. So if you watched this presentation, please fill out the survey.
And
Is any-
then
oh.
if you have any questions, you can always give us a call. Our phone number is 262-619-1634. And then, just give us a call and we can answer any of those questions. You can check us out on our website, sasofracine.org. Look for us on our Facebook. You can message us through Facebook. You can call our crisis line, which is oh my gosh, why am I drawing a blank, Scarlett? 637 SAFE, is that what it is?
1 sec. 262-637-7233.
Yes, which is 637 SAFE. That's how I remember it. That if you need any support, you can give us a call on our crisis line or our office.
Okay, thank you, ladies. And
Thank you so much.
This will be posted on the library's YouTube channel for anyone who was unable to attend tonight.
Okay. Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us. It was nice talking to everyone. Bye.
Bye.